A series of complex business transactions could result in the takeover of Telegraph newspapers and The Spectator by a fund tied to Abu Dhabi and the Emirati royal family. The Culture Secretary, Lucy Fraser, on Thursday issued a public interest intervention notice into Redbird IMI's prospective ownership of the group. A number of Conservative MPs has been urging the government to intervene. Let's hear some of the details from Henry Hill of the website ConservativeHome. Henry, welcome back. Should we be worried about the ownership of the Telegraph and the Spectator by funds linked to Abu Dhabi and to the Abu Dhabi state?
It is certainly something that the government should be looking at. What this comes down to is effectively, to what extent does Abu Dhabi have an active controlling interest? So Redbird IMI is an alliance, if you like, between Redbird, which is an American fund, and IMI, which is the Abu Dhabi Foreign Investment Fund. Now, they claim that Abu Dhabi is going to be a silent partner and that all of the leadership is going to come from the Americans. The president of Redbird is a former CNN chief executive. And, of course, we've had American media owners in the United Kingdom before, and they've been controversial in their turn. But can they be trusted on that? How can we guarantee that? Because obviously Abu Dhabi has a very different culture when it comes to press regulation and press freedom, and indeed an awful lot of other political things than does the United Kingdom. Now, apparently there is evidence from the United States, I have not seen it, but there's chatter that there is evidence from the United States that actually IMI is actually a much larger has much more controlling influence over the Redbird alliance than...
IMI being the Abu Dhabi...
International Media Investments, that's the Abu Dhabi branch, and then Redbird is an American sovereign wealth.
I mean, yes, presumably there will be assurances, but how can we trust these assurances? How on earth could these assurances be guaranteed?
It's an interesting question whenever it comes to press regulation, because, of course, when Rupert Murdoch bought the Times newspapers, he offered a guarantee of editorial independence, which was one of the ways that Margaret Thatcher managed to help get that through. And he more or less respected that. But, you know, there are people who would say that he did have an obvious an influence over the papers. And I think, actually, the burden of proof should be on IMI. It should be for them to demonstrate clearly and decisively that they are purely silent financial partners, and there should be some kind of remedy mechanism in place if that's found to not be the case. I don't think we're obliged to give them the benefit of the doubt. You know, the UK generally has a pretty lax view of foreign ownership, but you do need to take a decision. It's one thing having America, which is, for all its many faults, like an ally and a Western democracy and a Gulf monarchy.
The sale is being organised by Lloyds Bank, and the reason for that is that the Barclay brothers, who owned the Telegraph, had a £600 million debt which was called in by the bank. And the deal that's being offered by Redbird IMI is that they will pay off that debt for the Barclay brothers, and then they'll put some more money in and acquire the title. Does this raise some questions as to whether there's fair competition for the purchase?
It is absolutely short-circuiting the bidding process. So normally what would happen is that the papers, the media group would be put out to tender. It includes not just the Telegraph, but the Spectator magazine, as you say, and then people would bid, and the bids would be assessed. And what's actually happening is that effectively Redbird IMI is extending the Barclays a loan to the value of the group, as they put it, which is 600 million, and then with the option of redeeming that debt for control of the company instead of the Barclays having to pay it back. Now, that does, as you say, completely short-circuit the bidding process. It is legal. It's financially legal. It is a way for the Barclays to resolve their debts. They have a deadline with Lloyds, which cannot be hit with a full tender process. So that's why they're doing it, potentially. But yes, from a competition standpoint, it is deeply suboptimal.
David Davis was on earlier with Camilla, and he was saying, here's an example, there's a Conservative leadership contest being run. The Telegraph and the Spectator would both be very influential voices during such a leadership contest. We cannot possibly have those titles in the hands of a foreign state.
It's an interesting argument. The IMI is linked to a foreign state, and therefore it does potentially raise questions about foreign ownership that a normal buyout from a normal sovereign wealth fund wouldn't. But the United Kingdom typically does take a very, very lax approach towards foreign buyouts of football clubs, national companies and everything else. Now, that's very recently started to change. We've seen with the National Security and Investment Act that actually finally the government is starting to take a more active view about whether or not foreign funds and companies linked to foreign governments, specifically China normally, should be allowed to buy national assets. It would make sense, I think, to include the press in that kind of scrutiny relationship, but that does not involve necessarily prejudging any individual sale. Because, of course, the other question is the Barclays have until, I think, sometime in early December to make this deal with Lloyds. You could not organise a competitive tender in that time. So they do have a right to dispose of their assets in such a way as to stop them going bankrupt. So how do you square that circle, I think, is an interesting question.
It is an interesting question indeed. So it's going to come to a head very, very quickly. Thank you very much, Henry Hill.